Hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the 40th edition of the Hong Kong International Film Festival. I know everyone tonight is waiting for Martin McDonagh here for a masterclass. Of course he is coming, but first of all, we will have the Consul General of Ireland, Ms. Jennifer Bork, to come out to say a few words to you first. So welcome, Ms. Jennifer Bork.
Good evening, everyone, and let me start by saying thank you so much to Jeffrey and Albert and all of the people involved in putting together the Hong Kong International Film Festival, and huge congratulations for a very broad-ranging and successful programme this year. So, it's my huge honour and privilege to represent Ireland in Hong Kong. I'm the third Consul General here. I'm the first female Irish Consul General in Hong Kong. And the Consulate of Ireland, thank you very much. The Consulate General of Ireland has been here in Hong Kong for 10 years now. We're 10 years old. And we're celebrating by supporting a variety of different cultural offerings this year, an extended programme of cultural offerings that highlight the best of contemporary Irish modern culture. Irish culture is rooted in deep interconnections, and throughout the centuries, in the face of political, economic and social change, Irish people have emigrated. We've gone all over the world, and in going all over the world, we've brought our deep cultural traditions of story, song, dance and poetry everywhere around the world that we've travelled. It recounts our history, it elevates the everyday, and it breathes possibilities into the future. And for those of you who don't know much about Ireland, we're a very, very small country. We're only 5 million people, smaller than Hong Kong, or less people than Hong Kong. But our international cultural presence far outweighs our size. It plays a key role in building visibility, engagement, and an understanding of art, including the transformations that have contributed to modern and contemporary Irish society. Cultural engagement empowers us as Irish citizens, as European citizens, and as citizens of the world to share our values and perspectives in dialogue with other cultures and other people. The Consulate General of Ireland and myself were massively, immensely proud this year to sponsor the participation of the internationally acclaimed and Academy Award-winning director, screenwriter, playwright and producer, Mr. Martin McDonagh, as part of the Hong Kong International Film Festival 2024. Martin himself is Irish, grew up in London, spent a lot of time in Ireland, and it's very obvious through most of his work that his Irishness and his deep connection to Ireland plays a hugely significant role in all that he does. Most of his films have included one or more of Ireland's most beloved actors, and indeed Banshees of Inisherin, which I'm sure all of you have seen, has brought so much of the beauty of Ireland, including our talent and our wonderful actors, to so many people across the globe. And for me, I suppose, as a fan, as an Irish person, the interconnectedness of Irish culture really shines through his work, and there's a deep, deep resonance in that for Irish people. But this evening and throughout the film festival, and I hope all of you get a chance to see all of Martin's work, and I hope that through that you get a sense of Ireland in whatever way, and indeed all of the ways that it might present itself to you. So thanks to Martin, thanks to the film festival, and thanks to all of you, and enjoy the evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Now I have to introduce the moderator first. We have invited a local film critic and programmer and journalist, Mr. Clarence Choi, as our moderator for tonight. Please welcome. So now is the time. I have to introduce the protagonist of today. I think he needs no introduction now. Everyone knows him very well and everyone loved him, loved his work. So please welcome, put your hands together for Mr. Martin McDonagh.
This is a different jumper. Someone pointed out that I'm wearing the same thing from 20 years ago. It's a different jumper.
Oh, so you haven't aged?
A little bit. But thank you.
Right, okay. So to begin with, Martin, welcome to Hong Kong. This is your first time here.
No, I was here about 15 or 20 years ago, just for a weekend at the end of a Chinese trip. I loved it then, and I love it now.
Okay. So maybe to begin with, do you have a few words that you'd like to say to the audience first before we go into the questions?
Just thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to see the film tonight and the film tomorrow, and maybe yesterday's one too. And yeah, thanks for the wonderful welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So just a reminder, Martin will join us again tomorrow after the screening of the Banshees of Inisherin. So, of course, we're going to talk a lot today, but we're going to continue the conversation tomorrow. But to start with, Martin, maybe I hope you will forgive me for being pedantic, because actually I've watched all your films, and one thing which sprang to mind when I go through your filmography is that, well, a lot of your films, the titles, they do have place names in it, right? I mean, Bruges, Ebbing, Missouri, Inisherin, and not to mention your place, Connemara, Inishma, Linane. So why do you name your films with these titles specifically in them?
Laziness, I think. I don't know, there's something kind of poetic, I think, about using the place name. It kind of conjures up something, Inishmore, Inishman. I think it gives something a romantic feel, I think. But I guess lately, and you know this, I think the places have become made up places, because there isn't an Ebbing, and there isn't actually an Inisherin. And the reasons for that are kind of twofold, I guess. I didn't want these places to be a place that real people lived, where they could say, we're not like that, or something like that. But also with Inisherin, we filmed it in two very different places, on Inishmore, which is one of the Aran Islands, and Achill Island, which is further up the Irish coast. So that was part of the reason to make up an island, because there isn't anywhere with that kind of topography or geography in Ireland.
So Three Billboards actually is the first film in which the place in the title is fictional, because before that, for In Bruges, I understand that in your screenplay you even have the specific names of the streets and the locations in it. But for Three Billboards, Ebbing, Missouri, Missouri of course is a real place, but Ebbing, there is an Ebbing interstate. So this seems to be a juncture of sorts. So since well, the audience here, they have just seen Three Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. Can you tell us a little bit why? I mean, when you developed this particular story, this project, did you already have in mind that, well, this will not be a real place in Missouri, or did it change during the gestation?
I think it changed. In fact, when I think the script was written, and I don't think I had the place in the title, because we started location scouting all across the states. So we were looking in Utah and Alabama and Mississippi and places like this. So that was always kind of going to change once we found the ideal place to shoot. Partly it's just the phonetics of it. Something might sound better, and Ebbing, Missouri just kind of flowed somehow. But partly again, it was about not being in a place so specific that anyone might be offended to a degree, unless just people in Missouri are offended. But I did want it to be somewhere in the old American South, to touch on sort of the issues of racism and things like that, that the South had and has to this day. as does the North, I guess. So that was part of the thinking of that.
So, yeah.
But Bruges, yeah, like every single square and bridge and every single place we shot and church was all written into the script. Like I had the idea on a weekend in Bruges, and by the second day it had kind of gotten firm enough in my head, the story, that I'd sort of mapped out the route of, you know, the chases and which hotel they would stay in and which church they would go to, because I kind of did all the things that those two guys did, because there's not an awful lot to do in Bruges. It's very beautiful and it's very boring. The town, not the film. Well, that's for you to decide. Yeah, but and then I started going back to it once the script was written, and to make sure that those logistics were accurate.
So because actually for Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, there is a very explicit message in there. It's about, well, bigotry and reconciliation. So you might, I take it that you might want the message to come through to audiences, not that they see it as something universal rather than location, country specific, right? I mean, it's not just about Missouri, or maybe it's not even just about the US, but it could be about anywhere and everywhere.
Absolutely. I think with all my stuff, you hope that it would be as universal as possible, but you also sort of want to get the details as accurate as you can. So I did spend a month or two in Missouri, traveling around and listening to the cadences of speech and just to get a sense of what the roads were like and the little towns were like. As did, I think, Sam Rockwell. I know he went, he traveled around Missouri, worked with some cops there to pick up the details of speech and things like that. I think it's a good thing to do. Even if it's a made-up place, technically, you kind of need to immerse yourself in the place as much as you can.
But did you get some pushback or blowback from locals about, well, just as you said, I mean, well, for example, the Missourians, when they heard about your project, or maybe when they've seen the film, they would say that, well, it's not us. Well, this representation of us is a bit off. I mean, have you encountered that kind of blowback?
Not too much. Not from the people we met, for sure, when we filmed. Maybe a bit more from critics afterwards. But what do they know? But you always get that. I mean, even my Irish stuff, gets that sort of thing a lot. But I guess I'm not. These are all sort of fictional stories, and I'm never trying to, say this is a particular place. It's again, as you said, it's hopefully much more universal than that.
I think, well, in one of the plays that you wrote, I think it's a cripple Inishman. Actually, well, it's not a film that it could feed into a discussion. The Cripple of Inishman is a play that Martin wrote it was staged in 1996, if I'm correct. And actually it's a play about a character who tries to be cast in Robert Flaherty's documentary, The Men of Erin. So actually Robert Flaherty's documentary ran into similar problems afterwards. I mean, when people in the Iron, they actually did say that, well, they are actually, the director, Flaherty, wasn't really representing us correctly. And it seems that, well, even at in your early work, this is something that you already had in mind, right? I mean, how locals, the other side of the myth, maybe. Is this something that you're also interested in?
Definitely in that play, yeah, I kind of wanted to explore, what is fiction, what is made up. I think it's particularly sort of tricky in the case of The Man of Aaron because it's claimed to be a documentary, but even watching it at the time, I think people could tell that it wasn't really that scenes were staged. I think there was a shark hunt, and that had never happened in like 50 or 100 years. So I think filmmakers should be free to make whatever story they choose to. I think just that when you start calling it fact, I think that's when problems arise. So that play was just to lightly poke fun at that whole idea that it wasn't quite true. But then the play itself isn't quite true either. It's a work of fiction.
I think, critics, not myself, but some critics, right?
I apologise for the earlier statements.
Actually, I agree with parts of it. But anyway, critics did say that, at the beginning of your career as a playwright, they did take pot shots at your background because you were Irish, your parents are from Ireland, you were born in London, in Canberra, you grew up in London, you spent your holidays in Ireland. So critics back then, your detractors, they were saying, this guy from London, who is he to write all these stories about Ireland? So, how did you consider yourself? Because actually, before we came in, there was this brief discussion about how we should describe you. English-Irish, Irish-English, or even British. So, do you consider yourself... There you go. So do you consider yourself as an in-betweener of sorts, or no, this is not something that you have in mind?
Yeah, I think in between London Irish is something that I kind of am much more comfortable with. I think the word British to me has especially with a history of Irish parents, it's got difficult connotations. But I've always been sort of anti-nationalistic anyway. So saying that I'm one thing or another, I've never felt overly comfortable with. But I've only got an Irish passport, which is very handy these days. But yeah, London Irish seems the most fair, whatever that is. But yeah, so there was, especially in the early days, a lot of pot shots, a lot of criticism. But I guess my writing was always attempting to be a heightening in one way, and works of fiction. I was never trying to be. It was always about storytelling. And you have to make stuff up if you're a storyteller. I've also got a sort of dark sense of humour, you may have guessed. So the Irish plays were never going to be rosy postcards of Ireland. And I've written English plays and they're not rosy postcards of England either. But I think especially within Ireland, there's a bit more defensiveness and insecurity about a lot of that stuff, rightly, for many reasons. So that was sort of a part of the early criticism, I think. I hope with Inisherin, things have sort of eased off a little bit that way. But again, there were critics who said, that's not Ireland, that's not us, and it was never supposed to be.
So actually I know that you were born in London, you were raised in London, but you did spend quite a few summers or autumns? Or
most summers and winters were going back to Sligo and Galway. My mum's from Sligo on the west coast, and Galway is where dad's from, that's west coast too. And even as a 6-year-old, I think we went to Inishmore, which is where we filmed Inisherin and Achill Island too. So my childhood memories are very much have that Irish landscape in them, in it completely. And there's a love affair with Ireland that I have, but I feel Irish as much as I do London or any other place.
So when you actually first began writing your plays, stories about Ireland would then be the ones that you were interested in more than your ordinary surroundings in London?
Well, interesting to me, I had started to write plays that were sort of London set and English set, but I felt too tied down somehow storytelling-wise. I wasn't able to let the fiction flow, I guess. And I was much too imitative, I think, of the playwrights that I liked, like Harold Pinter or even David Mamet. But it was only when I started writing in an Irish idiom that I freed myself of that. You know, I think I still took a lot of Pinter's and Mamet's heightening of dialogue, but it was only when I put it in the Irish context that I felt free, I think.
We do see quite some influences from Harold Pinter, the dumbwaiter. Really,
it's more than an influence. I completely stole that whole idea for in Bruges. But I did tell him that once, and he said he was happy with homage. But in fact, the two characters, the names of the two characters in Bruges are actually the names of the actors who were first in The Dumbwaiter. So it was like a little inner reference. In case anyone ever accused me of ripping it off, I could say, no, but I did it on purpose.
It's an homage.
Yeah, exactly. A nod of the head.
Yeah, a nod of the head. This is something that I'm going to go into later. But actually, for those of you in the audience who might not know, I mean, before making films, Martin was and still is a very revered playwright.
Maybe not revered.
No, really?
Accepted.
Notorious?
Frowned upon.
Okay, because actually, Martin actually left school at the age of 16 because
I was stupid.
You just wanted to write screenplays. You wanted to dedicate more time in writing plays. And before your first short, 6-shooter, actually, you finished the Linnane trilogy, the Aran Island trilogy, and the Pillowman. And quite a few plays, and all of them very successful. But even back then, I mean, when I was running through some files and also some previous interviews that you gave, you said that, well, even back then, you weren't that much interested in theatre or inspired by theatre. Films will be the stuff that you are interested in. You were interested in, and films actually inspired you in your writing. Why was that?
I guess I just had a love of movies from like a very young age, from like 10 or 11. I think we got our first video recorder when I was like 11 or 12, and just started seeing like 10 movies a week, you know, and very quickly kind of discovered the greats, you know, the modern day greats like Scorsese and Terrence Malick and people like that, and then got into, you know, world cinema and Kurosawa and you know, all of the world greats in a very short period of time. So I always had that love, and tried to write screenplays, but they were very bad, and tried to write radio plays, and they weren't much better. But then when I started writing plays after maybe 7 or 8 years of trying these other things, I think something clicked, something worked. Partly practice maybe, but partly the disdain I had for theatre, again, freed something. But I also wanted to make the plays as cinematic as possible for lots of story elements to be happening on stage, as opposed to speaking about them off stage. So that's why I guess there's sort of lots of violence and exploding animals in a lot of my plays, as there are in the films. But somehow I think that's what tapped into that's why they became successful. I think it felt like there was a freshness to the theatre work I was doing. So I did that for about 10 years, but always kind of knowing that films were my first love, and always being scared of the possibility of making one, but knowing that I had to try it at least once. So that's when I made Six Shooter, the short movie, and it was scary and it's kind of terrifying. But I guess with each one you make, you kind of learn what you don't know, I think, and sometimes it's only by doing it that you can discover how to do it, you know. So In Bruges was the second one, the first feature, but I guess I learned enough I learned from my mistakes on the short to hopefully not repeat them on the second. But it was definitely working with Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell on that movie that they kind of guided me through it. They protected me from the money people, and which you always need, and they just kind of reassured me that I was on the right track.
Can you tell us a little bit, since you just talked about Six Shooter, your Oscar-winning best short film, can you tell us a little bit how you transitioned into filmmaking? Because again, from previous interviews, I don't know whether they misquoted you or anything, you did say that, well, you didn't know a thing about filmmaking going into the production of Six Shooter. So how did that production come about, and how did you manage to pull it off?
I guess I read some books. Again, Brendan was the lead actor in that, and he definitely helped me through that. But like on day one, and I storyboarded the whole thing. I've done that on all of the films, and I think that's a great tool. If there's any young filmmakers out here, I think it really helps. My scripts aren't usually image-based. They're usually, you know, about the dialogue and what happens, but there's not a lot of pictures or images in the script itself. So I always find that storyboarding is it's almost like a rewrite, but in pictures. So I guess I had that for the short film, and I think when you have that, it kind of helps guide you through it. Sometimes you don't realize, and one of the most important things of making a film is how much time you should spend on certain things. But again, that's only something that you realize from doing it once or twice, and seeing what you've got in the edit and what you would have liked to have had in the edit. But it was a terrifying experience, the short, but I guess I learned enough from it to not be quite as scared for the feature. But I'd say it's only after making the fourth one, In a Sharing, that I actually felt comfortable going to work on a film set. It took a while.
But dare I say, I mean, Six Shooter, it's quite audacious, quite bold in a way, because before Six Shooter, you were very successful in theatre with the two trilogies, with the plays. Probably the logical next step, would be to remake these plays into films. But you decided not to do that. You started afresh with a new story, completely unrelated to the stuff that you were doing in theatre. So you never really crossed your mind to repeat the plays, and to...
Not really. I guess my knowledge of plays that had been made into films, there aren't a lot of really good ones. I could count the number on the fingers of Brendan's hand from In a Sharing, and there are none. No, maybe there's like 3. We'll have a quiz later to see what they are. But so I didn't want to almost ruin the good parts of the plays by making them into films. But I also sort of wanted to dare myself to come up with something new and something that was purely cinematic, I guess. And luckily I've sort of stuck to that for a while. And haven't run out of stories yet. But just thinking about what you bring to a movie set, I think I didn't realize how much I'd learned in the rehearsal rooms of the plays. I'd never directed any of my plays, partly because, especially in the UK and Ireland, the playwright has the most power. more than the director, in fact. You know, they can't change a line. You pick the director and you pick the actors with the director. But also, like, every day you're talking to actors and working out what they need. So I think one of the good things about making six-shooter and making, you know, the early films was realizing that I had a tool that I didn't know I had. I like actors and I like talking about character with them and finding out what they need from me. You know, I'm still sort of scared about a lot of the whole process, but I think the one thing I always bring into each film is a love of actors and acting, and I hope that always sort of shows that it's not just about the visuals. It's the heart of, I think, every good movie is the actors.
And you do keep a very tight coterie of actors around you. I mean, your repertory, your Colin Farrell, Brandon, of course, and for Kerry Condon, and for the Banshees, you have Dave Pearce, who came back from Six-Shooter.
Yeah. David was the little guy who stabs, I don't know if you've seen Six-Shooter, he stabs the cow in Six-Shooter, and he stabbed it so well that I knew I wanted to bring him back. So he became the priest in Inisherin. But also the guy who played the policeman in Six-Shooter is the policeman Gary Lydon is the policeman in Banshees. But Sam Rockwell, I've worked with a couple of times and on a play. And in the play was also Christopher Walken, who was also in Seven Psychopaths with him. And I kind of think my next project will be with those two. So it's partly about working with the best actors around, and it's partly laziness on my part again. That, you know, I don't like calling up new people and having to, you know, take them out to dinner, and you just go straight to it.
So it's probably out of laziness that you work with the same editor and the same DP.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just joking. But actually, you've worked with Ben Davis and John Gregory for 2 or 3 films, or
yes.
maybe even further back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how did you actually work with them? Because as you said, well, working with actors probably it wouldn't be a problem for you. I mean, when you transition from the stage to films, because you've been working with actors, but in cinema, cinematography and the art of editing probably isn't something which might have concerned you when you were working on the stage. So did they help you, or how did you actually work with them in terms of bringing your vision to fruition?
Mostly I think it's about preparation, you know, especially with a DP. It's about talking through your references, watching the films that inspired you and inspired this particular story, but just time. So on Banshees of Inisherin, that was my 3rd film with Ben Davis, and we actually took a little house in Galway a year before we started shooting, and just talked. I'd already done the storyboards there, so just talked about the storyboards, talked about every single scene, and the first AD was there, first assistant director, and the designer was there too. So like even a year before we started shooting, we kind of knew what the shots would be and where the locations would be. And it's time that it's free, you know. It's again, if there's young filmmakers out there, as much kind of preparation time before the project starts is the most invaluable thing. But it also, you know, on the day, it means you're not scared because these are all friends, old collaborators, and that's partly one of the reasons of working with a lot of the same actors. Is that you're all on the same page from last time, and it also means that, like, for instance, on Inisherin, a lot of the smaller parts were actors who I'd worked with 20 years before, like David and Gary. Kerry was in one of my plays 20 years beforehand. But it also means, like, the film stars are working with people who they completely respect, you know. So Colin and Brendan would know David and know Gary and maybe would have worked with them 20 years ago. So there's no sort of hierarchy on a film set of mine. It's not about the movie star and the subsidiary characters. It's kind of like a play. Everyone's in it together.
But when you work with actors, how much leeway do you allow them in terms of the delivery? Would it be like you have to deliver this word just like that, nothing else? I mean, or some other more democratic approach?
It's not very democratic, if I'm being honest. No, it is in terms of delivery. It's not in terms of words. Like, they always have to say exactly every single word and every comma and full stop that's on the page. I'm a bit of a stickler or a dictator about that sort of stuff. But I think within that, same as with a stage play, there is so much nuance and differentiation from a line. It's like playing in a classical concert. You know, there's even though the notes are the same, the way you play it can be infinite, I think. So I don't think any of the actors I've worked with would say that was restrictive. In fact, I think it's kind of freeing to know that they're not going to be making anything up the morning they come in, but there's going to be many, many different ways to say a line.
Well, as a writer, the screenwriter, probably as you said, well, the exact words, they must be delivered by the actors, but when you actually wrote the screenplays, to find the right word, that must be some kind of a challenge. Actually, it's quite clear, even in the films, you did bring about this challenge of finding the right word. For example, for 3 Billboards, I remember the scene when Mildred and Dixon, they were talking about, well, Mildred saying, well, or that, sorry for that, I mean, nigger torturing, and then Dixon was saying, no, it's person of color torturing, and they were sort of having this conversation about whether we should use the N-word or person of color, and also in your other films as well. For example, in Bruges, I mean, this dialogue between Colin Farrell and Maurice Boissy, I mean, is it a pastiche? Is it an homage?
A nod of the
head?
Yeah.
Whether it's alcoves or nooks and crannies, or maybe in 7 Psychopaths, well, when Christopher Walken's character, Hans, said that, well, he kept on using the word bastard. Sorry about that. And then actually, well, his wife said, oh, well, darling, don't say that word. And he said, well, it's just a word. So probably this struggle for the right word is something that you are very much discerning about.
I think so, yeah, but hopefully in a sort of fun way. Like, when I get to those segments in a script, I kind of like having fun with, you know, I'll try to think, is it homage, is it nod of the head, and then let the characters have that same discussion. So a lot of it is about fun. I think the Persons of Color torturing was a little bit more loaded in terms of, it's more of a discussion about political correctness, and that, you know, the cop was so caught up in saying the right word, he was ignoring the actual thing he was doing, the torturing. So I think I just find it interesting, but mostly I find it fun. There's probably not anything more intelligent I could say about that. It's fun.
Okay, so speaking of nod of the head, maybe maybe allow me to go into something which is less intellectual and more visceral. I mean, we talked about nod of the head. About the head, I mean, a lot of the films, they involve heads or the blowing up of heads, beheading. In 6 Shooter, you've got should I spoil this for the audience? Or maybe, but there are a lot of heads being blown up in some of your films.
Oh, yeah.
And also beheading in your plays.
Yeah.
And about, well, cutting off of fingers.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of mutilation of the physical body going on. I mean, why the fascination about that?
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of that stuff. I should really go to a psychiatrist and find out what that's all about, but where's the fun in that? So, yeah, I don't know where that comes from. like I'm a really happy person, it surprises me sometimes that these things happen. I've got to do a rom-com one of these days, right?
With somebody's happen.
Yeah. Hopefully his.
Well, that'd be great, because actually in Seven Psychopaths, there's this big, I think it's Hans, right? I mean, Christopher Walken's character, he was telling the Martin in the film, Colin Farrell, saying, well, why did your female characters keep on dying? Or maybe, well, they just appear and they either got stabbed or they got killed within 5 seconds, and then women could be killed, but animals couldn't. So actually, well, is this something that is on your mind? I mean, in terms of, well, writing of male and female characters?
Yes. I mean, I think that was partly sort of a joke at the expense of the producers, who, I think in the original version of the script, the dog died at the end, and they said, we really would prefer it if that didn't happen. But there was never a mention about any of the violence towards people, and definitely not against women in the script. So then I added that line to kind of poke fun at those producers. It's something I just find sort of interesting to play with and to discuss. You know, as I think most of my work is sort of anti-violence, weirdly. There's just like a lot of violence in them. But I don't think that's necessarily contradictory. You know, I think Sam Peckinpah, who was a big sort of hero of mine, made very violent films, but I always take an anti-violence message or an anti-male message from most of his films. And I guess that's sort of what I'm trying to tap into a little bit.
Yeah, because actually your films, well, in a way they are about toxic masculinity, dare I say, and also, but it's also about tenderness between men as well. I mean, male bonding, you know, so there's this toggle between these two very different aspects of masculinity.
Yeah, definitely in Banshees there's those things. I think with Banshees it was almost as much about describing any kind of sad breakup, you know, it just happened to be a platonic one between these guys. But I guess to be as honest as you can about men and the way you see them, it is something I definitely like to explore as much as possible.
Actually, Martin, since it's a masterclass, so maybe can I ask you about your modus operandi in terms of writing screenplays? Because I recall reading somewhere that when you write your screenplays, it's not like you have a definite structure from the very beginning, as if you have index cards of like how this character will be go to A, from A to B to C to D. That's not how you work, right? I mean, you write and you are constantly even surprised by the characters themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. I never write a treatment, so I never know what's going to happen even 5 pages away from where I am. I think as you write, as you get to the middle, things should start to become clearer about what's going to happen towards the end. But I find it much more exciting and much more fresh to sort of not know what's going to happen. So with Inisherin, I remember all I had was this breakup, and I didn't think you could get a whole film out of that simple sort of idea. But as soon as Brendan's character on the page came into the pub and made the threat about the fingers, I didn't know he was going to say that until he said it. That he was going to start chopping his fingers off. But once he said it, so I was shocked. And I think when you shock yourself, hopefully an audience member will be in the same place. Similarly with 3 Billboards, when Woody's character, Woody Harrelson, kills himself, I didn't know that was going to happen. I assumed he's a big movie star, he would be there at the end. But again, when you don't know something like that is going to happen, I think that allows twists and turns to happen, which wouldn't have been there if I planned the story out, or the surprise of it wouldn't be there, I think. So, not that I'm saying you shouldn't ever do a treatment. I know certain writers, and it helps. Just personally, I would get bored.
So you never had a treatment before you started the screenplay, but would you have, for example, an idea or maybe even, God forbid, a message before you write the screenplay? For example, this project, for this story, I would like to talk about this particular concept or idea or theme, and then I'll just build a story around it. This is not how you work, right? No,
never. I seldom even know what the themes are, even after I've made a thing. Maybe that's laziness too, but yeah, I'm usually sort of surprised by what comes out thematically, I think. But I think, or I hope, that if you sort of have a decent attitude towards the world, I think that will usually, show itself by the end of the movie. Conversely, I think there are probably directors who hate the world, and it kind of shows by the end, even if they're trying not to show it. I won't mention any names, but I think you can discern their themes by accident almost. Yeah, no themes. I would again find that too constricting. I do almost like the idea of writing something that isn't necessarily what I believe in politically. I think that stuff by the end will show itself, but I do, especially like with Sam Rockwell's character in this, who's a racist and a horrible person, you still have to be truthful to that person and not be judgmental. And if you're laying an opinion on top of it, I don't think you're free to create the character as freely as you can. I think that's probably why a lot of the issues that came critically about that character came up, is that it was almost maybe not judged enough in the film for a certain level of film criticism, maybe.
Okay, Martin, I think maybe you might have had enough of me playing the shrink. So maybe we'll just open up briefly to the floor. So that maybe we can take one or two questions from the audience. If you do have any questions, please come up to the front, sort of the front, and we'll have a microphone here. So if you do have questions, please do raise your hand and then come to the front.
Can you hear me properly? It's nerve-wracking, to be honest. Sorry. First time using a microphone. I have a question prepared, and it's regarding. Well, first of all, I think I speak for everyone in the room when I say that it's an honor to have you here. It's a really great moment, and I'm very nervous, to be honest.
Me too.
Thank you.
You're doing well so far. Thanks.
So my question is regarding the theme of poetic justice and the optimistic end to the film, as Jason eventually undergoes a form of metamorphosis. So considering some time has passed since you directed the film, and there's sort of an ongoing crisis in attitude towards law enforcement in the US and kind of worldwide as well, and it's quite deteriorating if you consider the relationship. So in hindsight, is there anything you would change to the film, or would you keep the ending, the same?
I think I would definitely keep the ending as is. Yeah, I'm not sure if it is a hopeful ending or not, to be honest, because they're still in the car. They are discussing not killing the guy, but they're still driving somewhere. So it's kind of interesting, I think, to leave that in the audience's heads. But no, I don't think there's anything I would change about it. I hope it sort of captures what I thought of as America then, and I don't think that has changed in the years since, really. But that's not necessarily all negative either.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. And my question is about Sam Rockwell's character in Billboards and the Seven Psychopaths. I think maybe is his character queer in some way in Billboards? Like I guess it's a hint, but did you intentionally blur the line of his like sexual orientation? And is the character defined before you cast Sam Rockwell for it, or like maybe you imagined the character while thinking about Sam Rockwell? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
In terms of the gayness of the character, I don't think I really saw that so much. I know he's sort of a mummy's boy a little bit, but that's as far as I go with that. But I definitely wrote that part for Sam Rockwell, or how I heard Sam's voice in my head. Maybe he just brought all the gay aspects of it to himself. Next time I'm here, I'll bring Sam with me and we can ask.
Definitely, and look forward to that moment. Okay, but I think...
I'm sorry to interrupt. There's just one thing, because we have a special guest here in our audience who would also want to pose a question to Mr. Martin McDonagh, is animator Bill Plimpton.
Thank you. Hi. Where did your dark sense of humor come from?
Ireland. Good question. I guess so. I don't know. I've always naturally, laughed at the wrong things, I think. But it's probably my love of movies. Maybe I think Scorsese movies have that kind of thing, and yeah, it's probably I blame the movies. Thank you, movies. Thank you.
Okay, the lady over there, please.
I have a question about directing the dialogue scene, because usually when we're shooting dialogue using master and cover shots, it's different from theater, because the performance in theater will be more continuous. So, especially when you have that much tension within the dialogue. So, are all those dramatic conflicts formed in one continuous shot, or they just gathered from different shots in editing?
I think it changes with each scene, really, but I do know. So sometimes I think, especially if it's an angry sort of scene, you just need everyone to be up to speed, even in the wide shots. The length of the scene should be as long as an angry version of that scene would be. But I definitely, there's one thing I always do, I never move on from a scene or a scene's shooting unless I've heard truthfully every single line of dialogue, at least once. So I know that in the edit there will be at least one true, completely true version of every single line. Usually, if I don't really, most actors would have like 4 or 5 takes on a close-up. I don't usually go further than that, but that will have been done the whole scene from start to finish. But usually, if there's like one line you're keeping going to find it truthfully, or you'll have truthful versions of all the other lines too by that time. But I definitely recommend not moving on. And it's harder with lower budget things too, but try not to move on unless you've definitely heard everything truthfully.
Please, yes.
So hi Martin, it's nice to meet you here. So for me, the chemistry between you and Sam Rockwell is quite like the chemistry between Christopher Nolan and Cillian Murphy. So my first question is...
In a gay way? Thank you.
So my first question is it possible that one day
we'll have a baby?
that we have a film that directed by you, with Sam being the one and only leading actor, just as what Chris and Killian did in Oppenheimer.
I think if I have other actors around him, my true feelings for him won't be as visible to everyone on set. So I think I seldom have stories where there's just one sort of lead, as it were, actor. I think the next thing that hopefully is with Sam and Chris, they're sort of both leads in a way. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe we need to get a Best Actor Oscar for Sam to go with his supporting one. No, I think I do like collaborative scenes that are not just based on one character. I think so. I think I'll continue that way.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you. So my second question is: have you considered working with Cillian Murphy on a film that tells an Irish story?
I think Christopher Nolan will be jealous if I. Weirdly, one little fact that not many people know: I've got a play called The Pillar Man, and Cillian, 30 years ago, was in the original read-through of that in Ireland. He'd only made one film at the time, so I've known weirdly Cillian, since 1995, before you were born, and I'm kind of just glad that the world has seen what we knew in Ireland for many, many years.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's your casting sorted, right? Martin for your next film. Sam Rockwell, Cillian Murphy, produced by the guy called Christopher Nolan. With Brendan, of course. I think we are running out of time. I'm sure there are a lot of questions still, but as I mentioned, tomorrow Martin was to join us for the post-screening question and answer session after the Banshees of Inisherin. So if you haven't got your tickets for that, please do, and that will be the opportunity for you to ask questions. I'm so sorry, you can see the enthusiasm, Martin, the questions.
Just one quick one.
Can we? Okay, one more question. Okay, please.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, Martin.
Hi.
I'm extremely honored to be here and listen to your talk. So we as Hong Kong U students have actually produced and acted in a Mandarin version of The Pillar Man last semester. Yeah, so I was wondering, what are the different considerations in drafting up the language of the characters? For example, the pace, the explicitness of the language, how do the dialogues help in developing or improving the plot lines? What are the different considerations and priorities?
Good question. I think I love dialogue just for the sake of dialogue in lots of ways. And in Pillar Man, I think there's sort of just joy to be had in listening to these characters talk for ages. But I'm not sure really. I think there's a lot of leeway to play those characters, in different ways. But again, as long as you're hearing the truth of the lines, you're probably in the right area.
Just the truth of the line.
Yeah. Every line you say, you should believe this character is truthfully meaning this at that moment.
Thank you.
I think with that, we might have to conclude our conversation today. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.